Okay. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, my name's Cael. I'm 28 years old. I'll actually be 29 in another month. I was diagnosed with... my brain just farted. I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I think. I know DSM-5's changed it now, so it's all autistic spectrum disorder. And I work as an audio tech for corporate shows, a lot of convention centers, the auto show I just did. And I also do a lot of composing on the side, a lot of art, stuff like that, reading, hiking, general stuff. Yeah.
Cool. So right now we're talking about how kids with disabilities have trouble making friends. So tell me a little bit about what it was like making friends when you were a kid.
For me, it kind of went through a few distinct phases. When I was younger, I had a really hard time with it. I was lucky enough to go to behavioral modification school, which really helped out. So by the time I was in middle school, while I was still struggling quite a bit, it was a lot easier for me to engage with other people. I kind of had a better control over my own emotions and behavior, which is very, very important when you're dealing with people and they are confusing. You have to stay calm and observe. Watch what they do, watch what you're thinking, and just be careful and understand that you're going to make mistakes. The trick is to not get too upset when you make mistakes, because that will usually just compound your mistakes. It'll make them worse. And so for me, usually I tended to gravitate towards some of the weirder kids that just happen to fit my likes and interests a lot easier, and they tend to be a little more forgiving for any social faux pas because they're in the same boat you're in. High school was pretty much the same thing. I pretty much just stuck to the kind of the kids more on the outskirts, not so much the popular core kids that stuck to the social rules a lot more rigidly. You know, I tended to gravitate more towards the kids that were a little looser with it. They didn't mind you being a bit weird. I found they tended to be a bit more interesting as well. So it was easier to get interesting conversations going with them, learn new things, and try new things out with them. They were a lot more game for that kind of thing.
Okay. So I know you were talking a little bit earlier about how you felt like it was harder to make friends because you have autism. So if you could just sum it up, what do you think was the hardest part about making friends based on the diagnosis that you have?
Mostly it comes down to trying to figure out the body language and kind of the more subtle tells in the way people act. Like, I mean, you'll go on and on and on at length about something that really interests you, and you think it's cool, so you think, hey, other people will think this is cool too, and then when they see that I really know this stuff, they'll like me. Well, unfortunately, it doesn't work like that, and it's very hard to pick up on that. Like, you know, people won't necessarily, you know, kids won't necessarily want to be mean and just tell you flat out, like, hey, you're boring and weird, go away. But there'll be subtle ways that they posture themselves and facial gestures and things like that, that it takes time to learn what those mean. It takes time to be able to pick them out and know how to respond to that. And that was probably one of the hardest things that I had to deal with, was just, I would just go on and on and on about stuff that no one gave a crap about. And, you know, they would just think you were weird and boring, and they would just leave you alone after that. It'd be like, oh, the kid talks too much, it's just weird. So you have to learn to kind of curb your enthusiasm a bit and learn to look at how people are moving and the way they're talking. It's, you know, it's you're already at that disadvantage of you don't know that instinctually like other people do, so you have to spend the time to manually program that in yourself. It's probably the easiest way to explain it.
Okay, so what advice would you give somebody like an occupational therapist? There's a kid in front of them and they're saying, I don't know how to make friends and I'd really like to. What kind of advice would you give to somebody working with that kid?
That's the tricky part, because it's going to depend on the kid and their own little quirks, but usually if it's ASD, from what I've learned having it, and what I've learned from talking to other people, is they're going to have certain interests that they're going to be really drawn towards, and they will go on at length about that. And I know I've tried to interact with other people with ASD, having a pretty good hold on that myself. I have a hard time interacting with them because they drive me up the wall. So the advice I would give them, or the advice in dealing with them when they want to make friends, is to try to kind of get them to dial back that enthusiasm a little bit. Try to make them understand that, people are not going to have the same interests as you, and you can't just barge in and, let loose a deluge of information. Start off small. Start off with, running them through like little drills of, you meet someone new, you don't know anything about them. This is kind of the protocol you go through. And that's, I find, actually really good, because I think a lot of people with ASD tend to be fairly analytical of their surroundings. You might want to kind of help them become a little more emotionally detached from situations so they can take advantage of that analytical aspect. Get them to, when they meet someone new, just start off with, the basics, hey, how's it going? My name's this. What are you doing here? Or what are your interests? And get them to go from there. Get them to go in little steps, and also try to help them limit their lateral thinking, because I find that's another big difference with people with ASD and people without ASD is, they'll be talking along this track, but then they'll suddenly jump over here. And in here, it makes perfect sense. There's a connection there, but it's an outside observer. They're just like, what? And there's actually one of my ex-girlfriends who is ASD, has that problem quite a bit, and even she'll just jump topics in mid conversation. I'll be like, what, where are we, where'd that come from? So helping kids or young adults kind of curb that a bit will help immensely too with them making friends. People won't be so quick to write them off.
Okay, great. I think the last question that I have is, can you think of any misconceptions or about ASD that you might want to clear up, or there's things that you think that people may not know that you'd want them to know?
Not that I can think of. It's been around long enough now that I think most people that know what it is have a pretty good grasp on what kids with it are like. The trick is for people to differentiate between the low-functioning autistics and the high-functioning autistics. I think a lot of people end up meeting someone with the high-functioning, or on the high-functioning end of the disorder, but thinking they're going to act like the lower end of the disorder. So they're just going to be completely shut in and, not really paying attention. That's actually something I forgot to mention. Helping the kids maintain eye contact, teaching them to maintain eye contact, very important. I'm almost 30 and I still struggle with that. But yeah, I think for the most part it's been in the popular culture long enough now that most people have a fair idea of what it's like, so there's not really any misconceptions I can think of off the top of my head anyway.
Okay. All right, so any last comments or thoughts you want to put out there?
My mind has drawn a blank.
All right, well, thank you very much.
No problem.